I feel really the privilege to introduce today Andia Chakava, Investment Director of Grassa Marshall Trust, a very well-known leader in the continent and beyond the continent. I have known Andia for some time now, and we have attended conferences together. We serve together in the investment committee of the Restart Italian initiative of Opes Foundation to empower women leaders in Africa. And I should confess, Andia, that I know who you are, but once I really went through your bio, I was very much impressed by all what you have achieved in your life, or as you claim once, in your 3 lives. So really all the milestones and the big achievements that you have delivered so far, and what you are still doing to empower women, to advocate genderless investing, and to back up strong female leaders in the continent. So I wanted just to share with whoever is with us together today, something that you have done that, as I say, impressed me very much, because I learned that in 2008 you were named as one of the youngest managing director in a non-family company in Africa. You have been one of the very few and one of the first women to set up a fund management company in Africa twice. And so I think you have really achieved a lot in a very much male-dominated environment. So we really like to hear from you what you think impact investing should do and should deliver, and also something of your journey in the genderless investing space. But also, and here it comes very personal, I really like you to share with all of us something that tells a lot about the kind of leader you are, a kind of powerful woman you are, a kind of achiever. Because I know that when you were in London at a business school, before going back to Kenya, you decided to make a change in your name. And it can sound a little bit strange, but I know that it has a deep and profound meaning. And I believe it was a sort of inflection point in your life. So, Andia, the stage is yours. And again, thank you very much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you so much, Elena, and everybody that has invited me to this particular session. I will just touch on really briefly your question. My first name is Laura, and my second name is Andia. And for the most part of my life, especially when I did achieve a lot of those accolades, and I continue to, I was known as Laura. And at that time, I had not come to my awakening in terms of what it meant to be a woman in finance. So I actually went through a rebirth. I've had a friend that recently went through a rebirth, but she chose to shave her head and dye it blonde. I chose to put my middle name first because my middle name, Andia, is from my ethnic tribe, which is Maragoli, and it means the one who survived. So when women would have babies, they wouldn't name them until they were 2 because they didn't have access to healthcare. They would use traditional medicine. And if your baby survived past 2, then they would give you a name. So the name is Andia, who means that you overcame a lot of challenges to survive. And that's the Andia I'm going to talk to you about. It's the Andia, that is the Africa Gender Lens Investor. And for me, from that day forward, I've always said that my mission is the African woman first, but I'm now doing it on a global scale. Thank you so much, Elena. I will now go into my talk, which is really about how to be a conscious investor. I've written down some remarks, but I will communicate them with you with as much sort of emphasis. I recently held a birthday get together and I invited 12 women, 12 of my close friends, to share their stories. With limitations on group gatherings because of COVID, I had to create a list based on characteristics that I admired most about these women. This was based on their personal tales of transformation that transcended their professional roles and how COVID-19 had shaped that narrative. Experiences varied from self-hate due to spending so much time reflecting in isolation, job losses, confronting fertility challenges, rage about racial injustice, inability to pivot their business. We were authentically unpacking our changed outlook and perspective, and one thing was clear: we are all on a self-discovery journey. Impact investing is an industry that is also on a journey. According to IFC, investor appetite for impact investing is as high as $26 trillion, 21 trillion in publicly traded stocks and bonds, and 5 trillion in private markets. Not only does the impact investing industry have the potential to crowd in additional capital, it can also change mindset and drive impact in never before seen ways that can contribute to creating a sustainable and inclusive global economy. As an industry, sometimes we lose sight because we are trying to operate under an agreed industry measurement and reporting standard. We convene and reconvene, advocate and belabor ourselves with tools, case studies, and evidence. Impact measurement allows things to get done and lays the foundation for incremental change. However, we must be aware of other factors that simply cannot be measured because they're intangible yet impactful, like attitudes and perceptions that can influence commitment and affect relationships. Impact can also be eroded because of sudden disruptions as a result of political unrest, health threats like COVID-19, and environmental disasters. Therefore, being impactful is a never-ending wheel of purpose. As this happens, our world continues to change in complex ways, deepening the inequalities. Technology founders have increased their wealth. 10 of the richest people in the world have boosted their already vast wealth by more than $400 billion since the pandemic began, as their businesses were boosted by lockdowns and financial crises across the globe. Our governments have entrenched their power with all these curfews. Each cycle comes with its own turmoil, from business closure, rising cases of gender-based violence, increased adolescent pregnancy due to school closure, racial tension due to acts of injustice across the globe, and the latest, vaccine hoarding, also referred to as vaccine apartheid, between the haves and the have-not. One thing I know is that charity begins at home. So impact is not just what you do, it is simply a way of life. How can we do this more consciously and deliberately as investors? Generally, there is no us and them. We cannot design impact outcomes without the participants in the room. We need to be better listeners to avoid unintended consequences. In fact, the feminist mantra is nothing about us without us. My home country, Kenya, is celebrated for financial inclusion deepening using the mobile phone, with mobile transactions narrowing financial inclusion gaps to above 90% and also increased female autonomy and participation. It was, however, encouraged It did, however, encourage easy access to short-term and expensive debt, which manifests itself with 3.2 million listed in local credit bureaus, with majority of financing being overdraft bridge loans for subsistence purposes, excavated by the pandemic. Hard-hit sectors such as education, hospitality, events, and retail were faced with job closures and runways of less than 3 months. These economies enjoy no safety nets or insurance for situations like this, immediately creating abject poverty. How can we create skills and roles that retool and shape Africans' young population to global workers? How do we get the world to see the brilliance and talent of young people living in emerging markets? One of the ways is through collaboration. 8 years ago, I founded a country network of women in finance called New Faces, New Voices Kenya. 2020 was a good year for us. Despite COVID-19, we partnered with a record number of international organizations who were not able to travel. We were allocated increased responsibility and provided with resources to execute. But I kept thinking to myself, would power have shifted without the pandemic? Jobs, gender, financial inclusion are usually the top impact priorities at the enterprise level for the investee companies of small and growing capital providers operating in sub-Saharan Africa. Many of these women-led capital providers also prioritize jobs as a key impact objective. So assuming that we maintain this trend on focusing on job creation, we need to ask ourselves, how many of us are depending on indigenous teams to do our groundwork? How many of us are using indigenous teams to do the groundwork but are still retaining the power at decision-making level? How many of us are using locally present teams but working through expats or global consulting firms? This is not a blame or shame game, but a chance to do things differently after acknowledging our own power, privilege, and implicit biases that we bring into our impact expectations. Let's not pat ourselves on the back as we create jobs, even though they are numerous. We need to ask ourselves deeper questions like, are these jobs permanent or temporary? Several temporary workers have been left destitute after COVID. So are we creating seasonal or generational wealth? How many representatives from disadvantaged communities are hired? Are we entrenching power where it already exists because it is convenient? Are we only dealing with job creation in urban or rural areas? What is the outreach of the businesses we back? Are we paying people a living wage or a minimum wage? Are we taking advantage of the lax laws and regulations to behave recklessly, or are we imposing best practice standards? What is the ratio and pay of women, youth, and disabilities of workers employed? What about the companies we have been supporting? How can we cushion the distress? This is why I am so glad to be a member of the OPIS LCF Investment Committee. Ideally, impact-conscious investors should be the first responders, early adopters, and market leaders in demonstrating what is investable during times of uncertainty. So we need to see more first loss providers, reimbursable grants, and concessional capital to catalyze innovative market initiatives. There is a saying in my language that says, if you see a lioness in the rain, you might mistake it for a cat and try and befriend it only to get bitten. In the same way, when things are tough and uncertain as they are now, this is an opportune time for impact investors to demonstrate that we are lions and have the muscle to make a difference because we prioritize impact over return. Generally, as an impact-conscious investor, we acknowledge that good things take time through the provision of patient capital. We are prepared to do hard things by working in difficult regions and environments. We are building the evidence of impact as we act. We are the living tools of proof that it can be done. We have a responsibility to intentionally seek additionality. We know that these things are never simple, so intersectionality matters. So socioeconomic status, race, gender, age are all factors we cannot ignore in our disaggregated outcomes. We appreciate the intrinsic differences of each region and country. Africa is not a homogeneous continent. We have people that speak different languages, from French to English to Portuguese to even Italian. We need to be aware that we are not right because we hold the purse. In fact, that should make us more humble because we need to support to decide how to best utilize it. So it is not clear what will happen next, but what is clear is that we need to do something about it. So we build teams that are focused on purpose, passion, and impact. We need to be conscious of who is not in the room when making decisions and be deliberate about including them. Who is overlooked and misunderstood, especially Africa's youth. So when we are an impact investor, nothing is off the table. The bigger the problem, the more important the cause. So why is it easier to talk about gender than race? Why is it hard to change attitudes towards climate change? Can't we see class and pattern matching in our choices that influences our design, which then impacts our outcomes? A GIN study, which is the Global Network of Impact Investing, found that half of investment funds target SDG 8, decent work and economic growth, and SDG 1, no poverty, and about a quarter target SDG 3, which ensures healthy lives and promote well-being for all, and SDG 7, affordable and clean energy, and SDG 2, zero hunger. Only 13% are target SDG 5, gender equality, and SDG 10, reduced inequalities. How can you actually include these particular underinvested SDGs? The UN recognized Sustainable Development Goal 5, gender equality and women's empowerment, as a precondition for achieving the other 16 SDGs. When women earn a competitive income, they often invest in their families, food, healthcare, and education, setting off a cycle that improves outcomes for future generations. Women are also caregivers and are preoccupied about the future, making women natural allies to climate change. More women in the workplace are concentrated in occupations known as the 5 C's: caring, cashiering, catering, cleaning, and clerical functions, which are deemed essential work, thus increasing the risk of catching COVID. While men reportedly may have a higher fatality rate, women and girls are especially hurt by the resulting economic and social fallout. So when we practice gender lens investing, we're looking at a market opportunity to basically increase investment in women and girls. This is how I choose to impact the world, through investing in a Pan-African gender lensing vehicle that actually seeks to change and invest in women. We seek to maximize gender equality outcomes through product customization to suit underserved and unmet needs tailored for the female client base, increasing social justice through gendered organizational policies, and the creation and confidence of more visible women leaders, fund managers, business owners, investors, all acting as role models. We need to do this by also elevating the women's rights movement, by recognizing the contribution of women's rights organizations, boosting and appreciating the power for the collective of the African women self-help groups, understanding the skills and the networks that African women associations bring. This is my consciousness. What is your consciousness, and how will you pursue it? Thank you.
And thank you very much, because you have reminded us what an impact investor should do, and how we should really raise the bar, and looking at the bigger struggles and the biggest fights. And we should be there and dare what other funds or other investors do not dare. So thank you very much, Andia, for your time. And I know that there are many questions questions. I will just pick a very small one because I know that we don't have much time. But there is a lady asking whether you see the number of players in gender lens impact investing increasing.
Yes, I see the number of players increasing, but as much as I see them increasing, I see also a number of them that are falling off. And that's because it's been very difficult to get funding for very niche gender lens investing initiatives. It is new in the field. It is currently a concept that has been building momentum over the last 2-3 years, and investors are still sensitizing themselves. So everybody is asking for evidence. And that's why I think the impact investing community is used to going before the rest of the pure commercial investors to basically create the track record that can be used to make gender lens investing more mainstream and less niche. And we also don't want it to be a tick box as well.
Thank you, Andia, and really thank you very much for your work, for advocating for gender lens investing, and for being with us in our journey. Thank you, and see you very soon.
Okay, thank you, and all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Andia.